This is Our News, the weekend edition, and on the broadcast tonight, Hurricane Isaias is gone, sparing the country the worst. Plus, residents assessing the damage after the storm. And find out just how the rest of the hurricane season is shaping up.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Residents tonight breathing a sigh of relief as Tropical Storm Isaias now barrels its way up Florida's east coast. The National Emergency Management Agency issuing the all clear for the entire country at 9 this morning. Despite the all clear, it left many in Grand Bahama wondering whether the notice was given prematurely as severe weather conditions continued on that island. Now, officials at the Department of Meteorology did confirm that residents on Grand Bahama and Bimini would continue to experience severe showers and even thunderstorms as a result of the storm's outer bands. These would be the last two islands to experience the weather from the storm. Still, it did not keep residents from either walking or driving around to assess the damage. State Minister for Disaster Preparedness, Lewis, issued a statement advising residents in Grand Bahama and Bimini to stay at home despite the all clear. Meantime, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis surveying the damage left behind from Isaias today at the invitation of the U.S. government. The Prime Minister, along with opposition leader Philip Davis, U.S. official Kevin O'Reilly, and U.S. Coast Guard District 7 Commander Rear Admiral Eric Jones flew aboard a U.S. Coast Guard plane in a joint aerial observation of the islands affected by the hurricane. They went over South, Central, and North Andros towards Bimini and the Berry Islands, but because of prevailing weather conditions in Grand Bahama, the aircraft was unable to make the reconnaissance of that area. Well, as storm conditions subsided, residents began assessing the damage to their homes. Our Julian Gray tells us more.
As the winds died down and rain ceased, residents of New Providence began emerging one by one to assess the damage on their property. This man even came out to clean fish on the dock. As our news team traversed the streets of New Providence, we saw cars dodging puddles of water and people picking up leaves and debris. Mr. Brown was sitting on his porch listening to his Sabbath lesson when we met him. Brown said besides a few fallen trees, there was virtually no damage to his property.
I'm glad it didn't rain heavily, continuously, because my backyard usually floods. So at least I have to give thanks for that. Apart from that, we're fine.
Brown, who has lived in the Donattage Estates community for many years, said his power went out Friday evening, but it was no bother to him.
Luckily, we had got the portable, the radio, so at least we could keep up to see what was happening. And apart from the flashlights we have, I always keep my kerosene lamps. So I lit 3 lamps, and at least we were able to see through.
Yeah, well, at least it's breezy, but hopefully
I'm quite happy outside, enjoying the breeze, hoping that the worst is past.
Some communities like Pinewood, parts of Yamacraw, and Coral Lake saw up to a foot of flooding. There were also a few downed power lines in some areas. As we ventured further south, we met Derek Williamson on Seven Hills Road. He's lived in the community since 1992 and said this storm was good to them.
I call the storm not really a hurricane, because we actually receive tropical force winds, like between 35 miles to 50 miles an hour. Little bit of trees started to blow down, but no major damage.
Though many were without power throughout the storm, Williamson had a different experience.
Our power didn't go off at all. We had to stay in power all day, all night.
Oh, you guys were very fortunate.
Yeah, because of the elevated area.
Oh.
That's why. So, but the storm is good to us.
The all clear was given for the entire country at 9 a.m. Sunday. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Ahead of the hurricane's passage, residents in low-lying areas rushed to prepare in the event of flooding. However, many of them were fortunate this time around. Bethany McDermott has that angle.
As Hurricane Isaias moves away from the capital, we took to the streets to examine communities that are prone to flooding, and what we found is that it wasn't as bad this time around. Residents say they're relieved.
We visited Pinewood Gardens, Marshall Road, and Coral Harbor this evening, and the reaction was all the same. Usually around this time, residents of these areas would be cleaning out their homes due to severe flooding, but that didn't happen.
It isn't that bad, like normally, water up in the backyard. Sometimes it'll come in the house. Depends on how the water comes, a lot of rain, but this time it was easy for us. So God get us, man.
Cynthia Saunders says she's lived in Pinewood Gardens for many years and flooding has always been an issue. However, while she too is grateful things weren't too bad during Hurricane Isaias, she said she made no flood preparations this time around.
No, nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Was that because you...
There's plenty of wind and less rain. That's
So
all.
you were prepared for that?
Yeah.
However, the same could not be said for Mr. Wilson, who said he and his family prepared for the worst this hurricane season.
We get sandbags. That's the main thing, A lot of sandbags. That's all you need around here.
Over in Coral Harbor, it was a similar scene as the only major flooding was near the main entrance. We caught up with Francis as he was walking his dog. He said he also expected flooding.
Yes. Every time we have any serious weather, yes, this is what we expect. But it'll all go down within a couple of hours.
Still, the minimal flooding this time around doesn't mean residents won't be faced with a decades-old problem in the future. They had these suggestions to address the matter.
Well, listen, the government need to clean the drains. You know what I mean?
There's more drainage, that's all. There's drainage.
Place has been developed. I've always suggested we have another wall on top of this so that it holds back the water, but as you can see, it's spread out. It only takes a little bit more rain to kind of, have this whole place covered.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Bethany McDermott.
All right, thanks a lot, Bethany. Well, meanwhile, about 100 people in New Providence sought shelter during the storm. One of those persons had to go somewhere else after the shelter he was staying in sustained roof damage during the hurricane. Georgia O'Bain has the details.
A total of 10 hurricane shelters on New Providence were activated by NEMA on Friday morning, just hours ahead of the storm. Out of the 10 shelters, one became compromised during the storm when the roof of St. John's Native Baptist Church on Meeting Street sustained damage due to adverse weather conditions, according to NEMA. At the time, that shelter only had one male occupant who was later taken to the Salvation Army shelter. The New Providence Community Center on Blake Road also acted as an emergency shelter. According to shelter manager Uriel Adderley, there was an unexpected influx of persons from western New Providence.
Most of them are from Cable Beach. They're from this area. No, we have persons coming from Carmichael because the persons who are here mostly, in most cases, are relatives of either staff member or somebody connected with the church.
Adderley and his team were able to secure food and cases of water, cereal, and dozens of loaves of bread that lined the shelter hallway. The shelter had prepared to house hundreds.
We have about 35 persons in all. They're residents of New Providence. And the 35 represent 11 in addition to my staff, which is 7 persons, and the security personnel, which is 3 Defense Force officers, and 1 and 2 social workers.
The low numbers proved to be a benefit, according to Adderley, as they were able to fully exercise social distancing.
And everything went pretty smooth. I was expecting more people in, but they didn't come. But what we did, it gave us an advantage in that all of the persons that came in came as groups, families. And what we were able to do was, because of the social distancing and the issue with the coronavirus, we were able to put each person in a separate room. So in addition to the 2 massive rooms that we have in there, which is the auditorium and the shop, we have about 11 additional rooms. And what we did was divide every family into their respective room.
Over at Hillview Seventh-day Adventist Shelter, manager Sean Ray Jennings only had one person who spent the night, despite dozens coming in to register.
First night here at the shelter was awesome. We only had one person who came in. No, but we were prepared for. Let me tell you. Before the last hurricane that we was here, we had like 180 persons, and that's before COVID. now that it's a COVID time, I know it wouldn't. So we were looking at about 40 to 60 that we could really take in this time. If we had to, we can go up to about 80 at the most. And last night, like I said, we only had one person.
Jennings said he thinks the COVID-19 pandemic played a part in low numbers at local shelters.
I think maybe because of the COVID, people might not want to come out and, scared of that.
Down on Mackey Street, the Salvation Army also acted as an emergency shelter. According to Major Clarence Ingram, that shelter, which is usually full, only had 8 persons come in to register, and only 3 ended up staying the night, according to social services. Reporting for Our News, I'm Georgia Bain.
While Isaias is gone, Deputy Director at the Department of Meteorology, Basil Dean, said the department remains vigilant as other systems are already forming in the Atlantic.
And as we speak, there are 2 more areas we're looking at, one about 1,000 miles to the east of the Lesser Antilles. That has a very low chance of developing at the moment, but conditions could become more favorable in time. So that's another area that we'll be keeping our eyes on very closely. There's a second area just off the African coast. This one has quite a bit of wiggle in it. It has about a 20% chance already just moving off the African coast. So that too we'll want to keep our eyes on very closely. The middle of August is the peak of the hurricane season from a statistical perspective. So we anticipate more activities developing more rapidly over the next several weeks.
Dane said there is only one thing residents really need to focus on when preparing for a storm.
The key during hurricane events is not to panic. The calmer we remain, the better decisions we can make. We go through these processes quite regularly here in the Bahamas, and one must only just ask themselves, how many hurricanes have we went through and we came through okay? It is the same thing we're going through again, and it's all because of preparation. If we ensure, and I repeat, if we ensure that our surrounding is free of debris, that is the first step in our defense.
And still ahead tonight, Alive addresses some power and transmission challenges on several islands, and a weather tracker talks about this latest storm. Those stories and more coming up.
Journey TV presents the most open, honest, and revealing life stories. These stories of survival and strength will inspire you because there is freedom and healing in every story. Join me and my guest every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. and Sunday at 5:30 p.m. during the month of August on RTV channel 212 for real-life conversations. Journey TV, we share life's truths.
Next tonight, Telecom's giant Alive is touting the performance of its network during the passage of Hurricane Isaias. The company's chief information officer, Dwayne Davis, says while the network sustained no major damage, there was a challenge with commercial power. Despite that, he says the network performed extremely well.
We were impressed with the overall performance. Outside of commercial power, we had no major issues. 120 hours out pending the landfall of the hurricane, we deployed advanced teams. So they went to Exuma and Abaco, Grand Bahama to bring down the cows, which we call cellular on wheels, to secure those. And then we also had advanced engineers. So we're just basically waiting for the storm to come through.
The company says 96% of its 246 sites are currently operational and on air, providing service. However, customers on islands like Exuma, Andros, Cat Island, and Abaco may be experiencing limited services, while those in Grand Key, the Exuma Keys, and Eastern Grand Bahama are currently without service. And key to restoring service is power, which Davis says they're looking at alternative ways to address.
What we're doing is it's a combination of 2 things. We're trying to redeploy some generators and get some generation going. But also, we also have the mercy of BPL. We're working with BPL. We're constantly in talks with them and their restoration. So I think what we're doing is we're working through the evening to determine the best way. See if maybe we could relocate some fuel cells, maybe some power cells. I know for sure in Exuma, we have the main tower up that feeds the other tower. So Exuma's up. And I think we're working actively with our providers to get the keys up, which is the microwave link.
A local weather interceptor is heralding the work storm trackers do in providing critical information to meteorologists. Our Jillian Gray spoke with the storm specialist about the work his team did during the passage of Hurricane Isaias.
When hurricanes hit, usually people run for cover, but not Craig Lowe. He's the owner of SI Weather Network, who specializes in collecting storm data.
From wind speed readings to flood and storm surge data, Lowe and his team of weather interceptors gather and review every aspect of a storm.
With us collecting the surface data and then sending it off to the Met Office, we voluntarily collaborate with them by giving them a portal so that they can see into what we're doing. And we also email our observations as well. By us doing that, we're able to confirm what they're seeing on satellite and radar imagery. And then we're also able to confirm severe weather, lightning strikes, funnel cloud activity, tornadic activity. And then our teams are able to help the forecasters in making certain decisions through that very same data.
During Hurricane Isaias, Lowe said one of their weather instruments was damaged, which made giving information to the Met Office a bit tougher. For over 14 years, Lowe has been tracking storms. The certified severe weather spotter said the surface data collected is critical as meteorologists can make comparisons between storms and predict what future storms will do. He added that policymakers can also use the information on storm surge and flooding to adjust roadways and building plans. For Isaias, only the company's New Providence team was operational, as the rising coronavirus numbers in Grand Bahama forced that office to close.
We have the tropical office the Storm Intercept Tropical Office, that is stationed in Grand Bahama. However, because of the lockdown, the team that was in Grand Bahama decided, we're just going to lay low for a while because we're from separate homes and we don't want to be in close contact. So we've kind of disengaged the activity in Grand Bahama, but that will resume as soon as they're comfortable with, the COVID situation. And then additionally, we're looking at Inagua. Once everything works out and we get the support that we need, we're looking at Inagua because I think we tend to forget those southeastern islands a lot. And the data that is there would be very, very helpful for not only the forecasters, but the public as well.
As the storm died down, Lowe deployed their assessment team members who surveyed the damage after storms. With this hurricane season predicted to be an active one, Lowe encouraged Bahamians to continue to prepare.
We're looking at an early start to this activity, in my opinion, and we're not even at peak season yet. It's better to be over-prepared than not prepared at all. And I think that we're very laxed as a country living in the hurricane belt. I mean, we've survived so many storms, we've had near misses, we've become so complacent, but it only takes one. And we saw that with Dorian. And you never know when another Dorian can come knocking. So it's best for you to be prepared for whatever Mother Nature throws at you.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
When Our News, the weekend edition, comes back from the break, the opposition leader offers a piece of advice to the Prime Minister. And later, one hotelier's recommendation to government officials to clear up the confusion on visitors to the Bahamas.
Journey TV presents the most open, honest, and revealing life stories. These stories of survival and strength will inspire you because there is freedom and healing in every story. Join me and my guest every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. and Sunday at 5:30 p.m. during the month of August on RTV channel 212 for real-life conversations. Journey TV, we share life's truths.
Welcome back to Our News, the weekend edition. Opposition leader Philip Davis is slamming what he calls the Prime Minister's spur-of-the-moment decisions. Davis says the recent decision to implement COVID-19 restrictions with little to no warning is costing the Bahamian people.
On the weekend, you had the cancellation of weddings. And that, again, disrupted business because persons were given no notice. And even if it was allowable, no one knew that they were able to apply to the company authority to get permission to continue with their plans. No one knew that.
His comments came after the Prime Minister implemented stricter restrictions following a surge in COVID-19 cases. The lack of notice forced those with planned events over the past week to cancel or severely scale down, leaving many residents outraged. He says not only is Minnis hurting Bahamians, he is also hurting the economy.
It's just a complete lack of transparency, and it appears as though that if you don't have access to the competent authority, who eats your lunch?
As the Bahamas combats the coronavirus, government has used curfews and other restrictions to slow the spread of the virus. The use of curfews has drawn some criticism, with some observers questioning the constitutionality of the use of emergency orders, especially after the Prime Minister suggested that governments may have to make unconstitutional decisions to protect the public. Associate Professor of History at the University of the Bahamas, Dr. Christopher Curry, says he isn't aware of a time when curfew was used since the country became independent. However, he says it was a tool the colonial authorities used often.
In the 19th century, I think it was like in the 1880s, 1890s, when electricity was starting to be established in terms of, well, electrification of Bay Street started actually during the Civil War blockade running period. But it extended slowly along Bay Street and along the northern shore. But the problem was it cost a lot of money to run the lanterns. And as a cost-saving measure, the colonial government at the time decided to establish a curfew. I can't remember if it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night, where the lights were basically shut off and the town was shut down. All right? There was definitely a curfew in 1942 with the Burma Road riot because basically martial law was established.
Another instance was during the general strike of 1958. During the pandemic, many have expressed concern over the use of lockdowns to prevent the spread of the virus. Curry says it's a delicate balancing act.
There's an uneasy tension. On the one hand, people want to know that their democratic rights are protected, the right to assemble, the right to move about. The right to determine what apparel they wear on their body and on their face, right? And so some people are taking umbrage with these, what they consider to be draconian measures. Certainly some would even go further and say they're undemocratic. But the other side of it is health officials recognize the issue with COVID-19.
Curry describes the crisis as the perfect pandemic.
The dynamics of this pandemic is such that some people don't feel fearful enough of it, and others are extremely afraid of it because it's so easy to pass on and to spread. And so that's why I say it's the perfect pandemic. And it creates, I think it manifests itself in the dilemma that many people are facing. Some people are thinking it's not that dangerous, it's just like the flu. And that's an erroneous assumption. You're hearing a lot of people saying that. But because if you compare it to the common cold or flu that we get every year, you find that it's quite a different morbidity. And yet at the same time, that gives people a license because they think it's not that deadly like Ebola. And so people are saying, well, we should have the right to move about and congregate as we want, to go out to nightclubs and bars, to go to sports events or whatever.
The head of a major all-inclusive resort calls for an international marketing campaign. We'll explain why coming up next.
Rev up on the next promotion. Okay. Nice.
Bye. You give up it.
That's 2 out of 3.
Sign up for Rev Trio and opt in to NBA League Pass absolutely free. Visit rev.bs or call 601-8992 for details. Rev, you and us, together.
As the economy continues to grapple with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, Chairman of Superclub's collection of hotels and resorts, John Issa, says there needs to be a marketing campaign to clear up some of the confusion surrounding visitors.
We need to clarify the real situation, and there needs to be a sort of national marketing campaign to get the message out because of all the, conflicting messages.
His comments come after a government announcement that visitors coming to the Bahamas must quarantine for 14 days. Financial controller at the Courtyard Marriott says while health comes first, the country should do what's necessary to help businesses and keep residents safe.
We want to make sure that our health comes first, and we know we're battling something that definitely is in the norm. It isn't a regular flu or anything, but also we want to make sure that we can still help our staff in some kind of way. So of course business coming in would help it. So anything that kind of wards off that business would be a deterrent to us.